Hi, my name is Fred Wheeler and I love movies and I love James Bond. I've watched every single James Bond movie there is and I want more. And so let's talk about who as an actor could play James Bond or 007 in 2025. And before we even go there, I think there's a few things we need to discuss because James Bond needs to be reimagined for 2025. 007 is not the same thing that it was before. And to capture that audience, I think we really need to look at a lot of those aspects. It's a given that any actor that's going to be playing James Bond has to be a competent actor. And they always do select somebody who's very capable as an actor. Somebody who can portray the sophisticated suit-wearing spy who's, can be a romantic figure and also be sinister and also be threatening and also be charming and fun and funny and be upbeat, but also very much James Bond. I think we always think in terms of the guy wearing the suit saying, I'm James Bond, but he's an expert assassin. He's the expert action hero. And this is a huge aspect of James Bond. You've got to do quite a lot. The actor also needs to want to play 007 or James Bond, play that role, and also for a long time. And if they get typecast, they need to be able to accept that possibility. And there aren't a lot of actors who will necessarily feel that way. James Bond, as a character, I would say is not popular in the current age, our modern age, because he's psychologically tortured. Some people like that, a lot of people don't. He's a drunk. He drinks a lot of alcohol. He's a womanizer. And he's got his reasons, yes, but he's still a womanizer. And so women don't gravitate towards James Bond very much. And he's a lonely soul working for a spy agency, MI6, who no one trusts because nobody trusts any government around the world. Doesn't matter whether it's the British government, the American government, or anything else, plus all of their spy agencies. So it's very hard to make them feel like a sympathetic or a good figure for James Bond to be working for. So who is James Bond going to be working for? MI6. I mean, their reputation's not as bad as CIA, but it's not great. So there's a lot of things that need to be fed into this character for it to work, and whoever's going to be playing that character. You have to change all of that, I think, for the modern audience. There are certain aspects to James Bond that are always going to be there, but I think maybe the leanings need to be not quite so heavy. For James Bond to work, he needs to return to gadgets. Like, I cannot remember a time when there were not gadgets, advanced technology being used in the spy game. And sometimes very simple stuff, but clever. And we lost a lot of that in Daniel Craig's James Bond. And we also need a return to the quartermaster. Q needs to be an important character that helps James Bond navigate the technology of the world. And Q said it many times, like the only reason that the double O's have lived as long as they have, and particularly James Bond, is because of all of the contraptions and technology that they provide, all the equipment and gear. So I think that's another thing that we need to sort of lean on. We need to start thinking about James Bond being something other than a lone hero. Humour in a Bond film is really important, and sometimes we've had too much, sometimes we've had almost none. I think James Bond humour works best when it's situational rather than cheesy one-liners, which is too easy. I think that's a very nasty way of forcing humour into a movie. One-liners, not great. Or camp, again, not something I want to see in James Bond or portrayed by an actor playing James Bond. High action and adventure are staples of all Bond stories. They need to be able to create fear, there needs to be tension, and there needs to be an aspect of that espionage. That's what James Bond is. He's an espionage spy who's also serves as an assassin, but also serves as a key agent, right? So those are the things we need to see. And most movies have always had a very strong action-orientated story. James Bond needs to be a character like men tend to like James Bond, but women need to like James Bond too. Films have enough trouble with it being sort of tailored in one direction. I think James Bond needs to be a spy that both men and women, as in the audience, will enjoy watching. So you need to sort of file off some of the rough surfaces to, I think, Daniel Craig's James Bond and some of the other James Bonds that have been played, such as Timothy Dalton. Like there's very hard James Bond as well, and even Sean Connery at times, not always, but at times. Moneypenny needs to be a major character for Bond, like someone that Bond or James Bond can lean on when things aren't going well. But I think ultimately the story of Moneypenny is not just the secretary that he meets going in to see M, but also a friend. And I don't mean necessarily a lover. I actually, when I think about if James Bond was ever to retire from the role and get married, who would he marry? And it's Moneypenny. In my way of thinking, it's Moneypenny. But I think Moneypenny also knows exactly what James is like. So I would really like to see Moneypenny sort of be very much connected to the James Bond character and whoever's playing that character. And then this goes into Bond girls need to be more than just eye candy. I mean, I like that sort of thing because I'm a guy, but they need to be more than just sexual conquests. In the 007 stories, I found the best Bond girls are the ones who are kind of on the same level as Bond. Who Michelle Yeoh was great. Halle Berry was great. I can't remember it's black. I can't remember her first name. But basically the lady who played Pussy Galore was fantastic. There's been a couple of them. Erica did great in the Spy Who Loved Me. She played X. I think those are the sorts of Bond girls we probably need to have more of. Yep. And then we need to see more of the other 00s. There needs to be showcasing and a connection to the actor playing James Bond, showcasing that this audience is not just going to get to see James Bond, but that James Bond will need help sometimes. And that help will come from, and I think this is a character that they need to actually consider building into their own franchise eventually, but at least in the James Bond movies, we need to see 002. The black man who has a totally different story to James, but is his equal in every case. And then also I think we need the 009, the female spy, the spy that always seems to be dying and coming back. And I don't know if they can figure out how to do that, but I think that we need to see some iterations of the other 00s rather than sort of just assuming that there's only one 00 really and it's 007. And then lone James Bond hero stories would really benefit from the team story, that James Bond is the leader of those teams, but that this is where we're going. So there's a lot to be said for trying to figure out how to build in a new Bond and make it work in a modern audience, but also make it feel new, because you can't just keep doing the same thing over and over again. You do need to change. So here are some names of actors that I think could play James Bond. I'm going to just tell you who they are, and then I'm going to explain to you why I think they would make a good James Bond. First off is Henry Cavill. I know what you're thinking. It's always the name that comes up. Tom Holland would be my second. These are not in any order really. I'm just talking about them in this order because I just made this order up. Glenn Powell. I know he's not British. Richard Madden. Aaron Taylor Johnson. Another person who could do it. Sebastian Stan. Yes, I know he's not British. Tom Hiddleston could do this job. Nicholas Hoult. Honestly, think he would make a great James Bond. And then Theo James. These are two individuals who I think Theo James and then Jacob Elordi. Is it Elordi? Yeah. I think they may struggle more with the James Bond role compared to everybody else on this list. So let's start off with the really obvious one that everybody talks about, and that is 41-year-old Henry Cavill. Henry has a huge fan base, but really James Bond has never needed to have star power to be successful. So that is unimportant, really. He is a proven lead actor. He's played Superman and the Man of Steel. He played the main character in The Witcher series. I mean, he's been in other movies as well. Like, there's been quite a few movies that he's played, and he's done extremely well in them. He's great. He's got great physical strength. He looks physically fit. In fact, probably stronger and fitter than most actors could ever possibly hope to get to. Like, he's more than capable of dealing with that. More than capable. And he can do action scenes. He's done plenty of that. He was great in the Mission Impossible Fallout movie. And he's done other roles where that sort of thing has really worked out well. He is capable in every respect. Henry is also a working actor who can play anything that he personally likes if the source material is respected. If you don't respect it, you're going to have problems with Henry because he won't like playing what you're doing, which is a good sign. It's always good when you know you have an actor who will do their homework and will research and try to play the character the way it was imagined initially. I think the other problem that Henry Cavill suffers from is people think, well, 41, he's too old. But Henry looks like he's in his late 20s or maybe even his early 20s or is in his early 30s. He doesn't look 41 physically and face-wise. Like, his age means nothing. I'm not entirely sure that Henry is actually a human being because he does not seem to age. And some actors are like that. Some people are, and he's one of them. Henry shined in The Man from U.N.C.L.E., 2015. Now, this movie didn't do very well. I don't think that's his fault. But he was the debonair secret agent, proved he could handle Bond's mix of sophistication and ruthlessness. And I mean, honestly, when you look at Henry Cavill and the roles that he's done, but even before that, it felt like Henry Cavill was James Bond before he played any of these other roles in these other movies. He just comes across when he speaks to you outside of, when he's doing press junkets and so forth, and you just talk to him. You feel like you're talking to James Bond. It really does seem like that's the case. I think he is literally born to play that role. Now, he's 6 foot 1 inch tall. He's got a commanding build, and he's built on that. He's even stronger than he was before when he was younger. I mean, he's probably stronger now than he was in his 20s. Cavill has the imposing silhouette that you would expect from the classic Bond, like Sean Connery and Pierce Brosnan, heck, even Daniel Craig. Cavill's natural British accent comes out. It's polished elegance. It aligns perfectly with the Bond archetype. Cavill's, really, playing Superman and The Witcher, those are just roles that he was able to play. I don't think they define him in any way. He's demonstrated he has a range. He can do charismatic. He can do morally complex characters. He can be charming. He can be gritty. And he can be threatening, and he can be bad. So he can do it all. He's been the most requested name for years, which would give the franchise an immediate surge of buzz and confidence, I'm sure. But ultimately, as I've said, like, whoever plays Bond, it doesn't really matter because Bond, whoever they picked, has usually done perfectly fine. I think a lot of people say, well, he would be too expensive. But usually it's only the first movie that whoever's playing Bond, it's the first movie that I don't get paid that much depending on how much action they're doing themselves, how much stunt work. Okay, they get paid better if they're doing a lot more of that. But here's the thing. It doesn't matter. So the first movie might be, whatever price he's going to wind up pulling down. Anyway, it's not like you're going to be adding $30 or $40 million onto his already asking price. It doesn't work that way. And also, we're not dealing with the Broccoli's anymore. We're dealing with Amazon. Amazon isn't really worried about spending lots of money. I mean, they see Bond more than just the movies. They see it as a whole sort of franchise to work with. Video games, movies, they'll do a lot more for sure. Heck, I'm sure they'll do a TV series if they can. Cavill embodies the rugged physical, nature of Bond, and I think that's a really important aspect. Like one of the hardest things is usually whoever's playing the actor for James Bond, they physically get worn down and hurt and injured a lot until eventually they decide they can't keep playing the role because one, they're getting older, but two, they're suffering so many injuries. And Cavill can handle that, okay? He's the best of both worlds, and he's an excellent choice. And I do believe, since he was almost cast when he was in his 20s as this role, I honestly think he's more than capable of doing it, and he would be able to handle the fame that it would bring him, because that's really not been a factor for him. The next person is Tom Holland. Tom Holland, and also I like to point out that Henry wants to play James Bond. Just like Tom Holland really, really wants to play James Bond. He's 29 now. I know a lot of people view him as being like a teenager, but he's almost 30. He's going into his 30s. So he he's certainly got that young look to him, but he's athletic, and he does his own stunts. And he doesn't shy away from that. He's very acrobatic. He can deal with pretty much anything they throw at him. Okay? Holland can deliver dynamic action scenes. He's got that energy. Like we've seen it as he plays Spider-Man, that level of energy. Holland brings a likableness. Like it's hard not to like Holland. And he's got natural charisma. He's perfect for a modern audience, really, in my opinion. Slightly more humanized Bond, maybe. You wouldn't get that dark, sort of somber, tortured feel from this character. I think Tom would not be bringing that, although it could be written that way and then he wouldn't have a choice. Tom feels more relatable without losing that sophistication. If you look at what he's done in the past, he's actually done a lot of different roles. So casting Holland, I wouldn't say it would signal a bold new direction for the franchise, but it would certainly put, he would be one of the younger Bonds to have ever been played if he wound up getting the role. He can play an emotionally layered Bond with wit and vulnerability in a tuxedo, or not in a tuxedo. Tom is a great actor who is actually, I think, becoming a legitimate working actor. When I say working actor, Henry is a working actor. Tom is a working actor. There are people who they'll take the role and they will apply for a role, and it doesn't matter what the role is, they can play the role because that is the job. That is a working actor, and they'll keep doing that for as long as they possibly can until they retire. And it doesn't matter what they play. They will play many, many different famous roles in their lifetime. And I believe Tom and Henry are those types of actors, working actors. And there's a few more to be discussed about that. So Tom, I don't think is off the cards. I know, again, people say he's going to be too expensive. But I don't think Amazon really cares, frankly, in the slightest, because it would just mean the price of the first movie for the actor wouldn't be the low price that they would normally offer. Because after that, you're being offered $20, $30, $40 million, depending on how successful those movies are. And they're often very successful. Not always. There's been a couple who that haven't, but generally they are. So yes, Tom Holland. Next, Glenn Powell. I know he's not British. He's 36 years old. He's not. He doesn't look old. He looks 20. Powell has that suave confidence, easy charm, almost a certain arrogance to him, for sure, that you might associate with 007. His screen presence in films like Top Gun, Maverick was very good. He's been in the Hitman show. He can play cocky, he can play stylish, he can play witty. He's definitely somebody that the modern audience would gravitate towards. And then, after playing, in the movie Top Gun as Hangman and Maverick, he also had a role in Twister. He's playing the running man. We're talking about action, romance. He's doing it all. Like, he's capable of doing all of that. And he can deal with the physical demanding aspect of the role. He's incredibly fit. He's demonstrated he's athletic, he's got poise, and he can deal with high-octane espionage sequences. Powell channels that sort of old-school Hollywood leading man energy. Heck, even kind of like a Sean Connery vibe, I would say, because Sean Connery's James Bond had a very sort of arrogant nature to him, very sort of, and that sort of feels like that's kind of Glenn, while feeling still fresh. I still think it would work. I would still think it would be contemporary, making him, appeal to bridge the classic Bond fans to the new generation. And one of the really important things to consider is, like, how do you grow your audience when the Bond fan base continues to die off and shrink, and the number of people going to the movies is less, and the number of people going to Bond films tends to not be going up necessarily. He's in the perfect zone for me. I think Glenn would do very well. And he's also mature enough that he could carry the authority, and young enough for multiple films over the decades. That's not a problem. And whether he plays sort of like, a rogue or a charming con man, he can bring a danger and a sense of humour to the role, and he can make Bond feel lethal and likeable. And that is really important, that Bond needs to feel lethal but likeable. And women love watching him. Like, Glenn Powell is like catnip for women. So I think that's an important thing, is to try to capture that audience, since a lot of men don't go and see Bond films because their partners are women who don't like Bond. So I think that's an important thing to consider. The next one may be a bit of a surprise, but I think it still will work, and that is Richard Madden. Now, he is 39. And you might be thinking, well, he's kind of getting a bit older and so forth. But he's one of these actors who kind of looks much younger than his age. He's been in The Bodyguard. He's been in Eternal, starring pretty much as a Superman hero. Like, he's played Superman essentially in the Eternals, right? Spy drama experience, he's done that. He's got that classic Bond build and demure. He can do sophisticated. Madden has starred in The Bodyguard. He can do political thriller, where he plays sort of like a conflicted protection officer. His performances show off his intensity. He can play intense. He can play composed under pressure. He can have emotional depth. He has all of the essential aspects that Bond might require when playing him. He balances approachable charm with, an undercurrent of danger, making him believable as someone who can, seduce the allies and outwit the enemies. You would believe this now, and he's only stands like 5 foot 10 inches, 5 feet 10 inches, but he's lean. He's athletic build. He looks incredible. Both high fashion tuxedos and brutal action scenes. I think he can do all of that. He's also got a Scottish heritage, which kind of ties him back to James Bond's original sort of heritage that Ian Fleming put into the novels. I don't think that's a huge aspect. Bond was supposed to be half Scottish, and so maybe he can bring some aspect of that from his own upbringing into the character. That would be quite interesting, because we've often sort of viewed James Bond as just being English and nothing else, but there's Scottish in him as well. Offering a subtle nod to the character's roots would be nice, making it feel a bit more authentic maybe. Madden is mature. He's mature enough to deal with the gravity of playing this character multiple times, and he's certainly similar age to when Daniel Craig entered, certainly younger than some of the other people who've played James Bond, so that's not really a problem, because they're looking for a younger James Bond, right? He's got a proven track record. He's done Game of Thrones, Cinderella, Eternals, and, he can carry a global franchise. I think he's quite capable of doing that. I think Richard Madden is unfortunately one of those actors who would do the role but might find it intimidating. So you would probably have to convince him to do it, because I don't think he necessarily could be easily convinced to take on the role. The next one is Aaron Taylor Johnson. Aaron Taylor Johnson is 33. He looks young. He can keep playing this role for a long time, just like many of the other actors I've mentioned. He's experienced in action, so he's done The Bullet Train, Avengers Ultron. He can combine physical wits and versatility. He can fit the charm and toughness that Bond requires. He's played parts where there was physical aspects required in Kick-Ass, to Bullet Train, and also Tenet. Let's not forget Tenet as well. He's shown he can handle complex fight choreography and stunts and high intensity scenes with confidence. So, we might want to laugh a little bit about his movie Craven, but the reality is that he was more than fit and capable of dealing with that role. Even if the film wasn't any good, his ability to actually perform those action scenes aren't really under question. So Taylor Johnson has that rugged feel to him a little bit too, slightly unpredictable nature or energy, and he would certainly make Bond feel dangerous as well as charming, and he embodies that duality. And he can pull off the sharp suit like all of these actors can. So I don't think that is a problem. He's also considered to be not overexposed. Again, I don't think there's a big factor, because the Broccoli's are not involved anymore, so they're not going to follow necessarily the formula that they've always followed in the past, which is they cast somebody that is an unknown. That's not really true, because Pierce Brosnan was not an unknown when he became James Bond, and neither was Timothy Dalton. They were not unknowns at all. And frankly, you could say, Roger Moore was an unknown. Roger Moore was done the Saint and so forth, but he really wasn't unknown. Not at that point. Not when he finally got that role. So I think that is a myth in terms of the auditioning for, who can get the role of James Bond. But yeah, I think he would probably make a good James Bond. I understand that the Broccolis were quite pleased with the idea of having Aaron play this role, but because they're not really part of the process anymore, they no longer have control. I just don't think that necessarily means that it's going to be him. Yeah. Next is Sebastian Stan. Now, Sebastian Stan is 42, and I know what you're thinking. Well, he's getting a bit too old now. Maybe if he was a bit younger, but again, he's one of those actors that still looks quite a lot younger. You shave off the facial hair and it's a completely different person underneath there. He looks a lot younger than his age, and he probably will look that way for quite a lot longer, many years from now, decades from now. He's played the Winter Soldier. He's Pam and Tommy. He can show a balance of elegance and menace. He can do both. He can be sophisticated. He's got all of the things that Bond needs in terms of qualities. He has the ability to switch between charming to ruthless. He's done that in just seconds. He can do that very quickly. And I think that he can deal with espionage and intrigue. He's had years and years in the Marvel cinematic universe, training in heavy stunt work and sequences and high-octane fights. And so I think, again, he's physically perfect for a role like this. He's born in Romania, so he's not English, I know, raised in the US. But he's polished. He's a polished performer. He's been in theatre. Stan, Sebastian exudes that cosmopolitan sort of presence. So a globe-trotting Bond played by Sebastian Stan, I think could do very well. Like, I don't think that's an issue, frankly. And I think he's probably more than happy to play that role. In fact, I can see him playing roles in Marvel's cinematic universe and Bond for years. Because it's only 3 to 6 months of filming if you're lucky. Maybe two months, depending on how well organised they are. And then you're done, even with pickups and reshoots. So, actors can play more than one role in a year, and certainly over a couple of years. Next is Tom Hiddleston. Now, he's 44, and I know what you're thinking. He's kind of getting a bit older, and I hate to say it. He's, again, one of those actors who doesn't look his age. He looks much younger than his age. He can deliver stellar performances. He's great in the Night Manager. Certainly I would say this is, if you're going to audition for Bond, like The Night Manager is a really good example of this. Cunning, he can play cunning operative who navigates danger. He can be elegant. He can be intelligent. He can be suave. He has a naturally polished demeanour and elegant. He almost feels too polished. But the reality is that Tom can play anything. It's not, if you see him as one thing, it's really not an issue. He can play and be really elegant in terms of his speech, but he is able to do everything. Like, when he decides to do something, he can do it. He can do the cultured side of James Bond. He's known for his work as Loki in the MCU, but Hiddleston has been able to balance many different roles. So it's not like he is one of those actors that can be charming, menacing, humorous, all qualities required in a modern Bond. He is also 6 foot 2 inches, so he's not short. He's got a decent stature. Does he have the physical body? Honestly, if you told Tom that he needs to buff up, it's not going to be something he can't do. He'll figure out how to make that work. He's confident, and he can dominate on the screen. He pulls people to him. He can deal with heavy dialogue scenes, and he can do action. And he often steals scenes. He's a scene stealer. So it's not like Tom can't get the audience to be interested in watching him. I definitely think he can channel the elegance of Roger Moore and Pierce Brosnan and still have the intensity that you would expect from, the likes of Timothy Dalton and Daniel Craig, and Sean Connery, frankly, too. And ever since Night Manager, his name has consistently appeared in Bond roles, and he always smiles. So the crowd is really pleased with the idea of, they would like to see him, and he would be happy to play the role. Because the thing, there's a couple of people here who are working actors. They'll just play whatever you put in front of them. Tom is on another level, though. Tom is an expert working actor who can play anything you put in front of him. And he will play anything you put in front of him. If he's going to get paid, he'll play that role. Not a problem. And he will play that role for as long as you like. I can see Tom Hiddleston playing Loki and other roles for many years. I don't think he'll stop. So he's not the sort of actor who doesn't want to play James Bond. And he's not the sort of actor who will say, nah, I don't want to keep playing that role, because he's an actor. That's his mentality. He plays roles, and he will play the same role. He would not be worried about being typecast. He'll just keep playing the same role. If he's still getting paid, he's still having to show up and do his job, that's how he'll operate. It's one of the great things about Tom. Next, Nicholas Hoult. He's 35. So he's getting a little bit older, but again, he's got a very youthful appearance. He looks much younger than he appears. Look, he looks like he's in his 20s, and he's 35. I mean, there's times when you see him and he does kind of look, maybe he is 35, but he's capable of changing all of that and looking very, very different. You shave him, and you got a different person underneath. He can play cool. He can be refined. He can definitely feel comfortable in the suit of Bond, be sophisticated, yet have that deadly persona. He can be charming without being overbearing, which is always nice. He can deal with dark humour. He can deal with most humour, actually. And he has that intensity. I mean, Renfield is a good example of this. Mad Max Fury Road is another great example. Heck, even Lex Luthor in Superman just recently is another good example of this. Hoult has proven he has balance. He can have, and he's done all those X-Men movies. Like there's a bunch of different roles that he's done. He's done so many. He can handle this. It's not something that it's beyond him. And I don't think he would be scared away from the idea. He can be menacing, and he's got emotional depth. So he can do all of that. Qualities that are essential to any modern James Bond. And he's athletic. He's got a tall build. He can buff up for sure. He's 6'3", so he's not a small person. He has that presence. He can definitely carry action scenes and still look sleek in that tuxedo. Hoult is well known also for not being overexposed. And I think the thing is that it's not that he's overexposed, it's that actually Nicholas has done a lot of different roles. He's done a lot of superhero stuff, different sides of the fence, but he's done a lot of roles full stop. So I don't know that you need to concern yourself with that aspect of the actor. Nicholas is quite capable of playing multiple roles and never being heavily defined as being one, which makes him a believable Bond without that sort of that heavy audience baggage, because nobody sort of locked him down. It's funny how that seems to be the case for some actors, and he's one where he's never played necessarily the lead role. He's always been a supporting actor. But maybe this would change if he played James Bond. I don't know. If the franchise aims for sort of a sharper psychological take, and I think that's quite possible. I think he can do a very good Bond. Hoult's ability to portray subtle complexity will make him a standout for, compared to your conventional choices. And again, Nicholas is a working actor. He can play anything, and he will play anything, and he's not really worried too much about being locked down to a particular role. It's not something that concerns him, because really, you could play James Bond for most of your career and then come out the other end and you'll be fine, because you're dealing with something completely different. You'll be a bit older, you're doing less action, you're going into different roles. Now these last two are a little bit different. I know less about them. I also feel like that Theo and Jacob are more likely to struggle playing Bond, not because they couldn't do it well, but the fame that goes with it. I think that, and maybe the pressure, I think they might struggle with those aspects of it. But Theo James is 40, but he does really look 40 again. He exudes that polished elegance that defines Bond. He's got the charm. He feels authentic in a high society setting, and his work on the Divergent movie series. I mean, those movies weren't great, but they still were financially, successful. He's played the Gentleman TV adaptation. He demonstrates he can handle fight choreography. He can use firearms. He can deal with intense action scenes and still remain stylish. So Theo, I think, can do this. Now, Bond needs a voice that commands attention. And Theo's tone adds not only authority, but sensuality to the role. One of the aspects of Bond is being the ladies' man. And it's all right to be the ladies' man. It's just being the womanizer that might be the more problematic aspect. And if we can kind of lean further away from that, and we get people who can portray something that doesn't feel that way, then that's probably a good thing. James is mature enough to bring whatever he can to this, but I do think he might have potentially reservations in playing a part like this. You never know until people are put under the pressure and the microscope, right? He can also do brooding anti-heroes, which I don't know that we want to go back to that, but he is capable of doing it. And he is a very capable actor, and he can be a cultured gentleman and that ruthless operative. So yes, he can do the duality as well. And then Jacob Elordi, he's 28, so he's quite young. He is 6'5", so he's a big man. He's imposing. He can look elegant. He's got that silhouette, makes him stand out physically. He can be commanding. He would definitely be a stylish 007. He brings youthfulness, contemporary energy. He would certainly, in some respects, maybe reinvent Bond for a new generation without losing the character's sophistication. He can do dark. He can do complex. Europa is a good example of this. Romantic lead in Priscilla. So he can do romance. And I think this is one of the things that people have always been concerned with Henry Cavill, is they don't feel like Henry Cavill can do romance. But if you can get an actor who can do romance, maybe we can get further away from the womanizer and more just, somebody that the ladies will like to watch. But he can be charming and he can be menacing. He can do it all. He's often seen in high fashion campaigns. He definitely looks at home and that sort of thing. I think he's got a reasonably rapidly growing international fan base, but again, that's not hugely important when you're playing James Bond. So those would be my picks. Now, do I think that they will get it? What tends to happen with James Bond when they're casting James Bond is we get an actor that nobody had even considered. That often tends to be the case. Now, that was under the Broccoli's. I think under Amazon that it's going to be a different animal. I think it's still possible that they will do that, but I think it is also possible that they will simply select the person who is most passionate and will do the best job possible and able to deal with every aspect of playing Bond. And as I said, one of the hardest things is like playing sophisticated Bond is not hard. But doing all of the action stuff, it can be very, very tough. So they'll find somebody who can do that. So I suspect that the actor who is finally announced will be somebody that's not on this list. It quite possibly won't be. Certainly under the Broccoli's, they probably wouldn't be on this list. And then also too, we may have not even heard of them. We may not have seen them in anything. But under Amazon, all bets are off. I think because they now have creative control, they will do whatever they think is going to work. And I don't think they're put off by the idea of paying a bit more money to an actor for their first role in James Bond, because as I said, often the first movie is the one they get paid very little for, and the second and third movie are the ones where the price just jumps up very quickly. So yeah, that was my view, and I don't know what I'll talk about next week. I'm thinking about it. I'm writing stuff down and jotting stuff down, and maybe I'll come back to something else. Maybe we'll come back to James Bond, but for now we're not. Those were my thoughts. See you later.